Affairs Department, University of Minnesota. She informs me that she's got to be at another commitment at 4 o'clock, and we're going to give her, therefore, the first opportunity to say something today. I don't know exactly what she wants to say. Our general topic is listed as Our Forgotten Neighbors, and has the subtitle, Inadequacy of Public and Community Services in the Ghettos. Now this at least is a starting point, and perhaps we can go on from there. And again, I'm going to have to say, as was said to me, that we'll have to speak rather loudly because there are some noises, particularly at that end of the room. And we'll ask that Ms. Deere speak at this time. You want this?
This is quite a switch for me because usually the Indians are last. And so I have a chance to get my words in first at this time. First of all, I'd like to commend the Augsburg College and all of you who are here and who've had a part in planning and carrying out this program. I think this is a very exciting opportunity for you to meet people in the community, to hear speakers of various backgrounds, and to know firsthand what some of the problems are. I'm sorry that I'll have to leave, but I hope that I will stimulate you to think about our forgotten Americans. This is the phrase that President Johnson used in his State of the Union message last year when he talked about us. And I should say it always annoys me and pains me to hear this, and I keep thinking that if more of us speak up and speak out, that eventually this will change. Now, in 10 minutes, I certainly can't talk to you and give you all the information that you need on American Indians. First of all, because I do not myself have a global knowledge of Indians. I think that when you do hear people of minority groups, you should bear in mind what the background is and what their frame of reference is, because I certainly cannot pretend to speak for all American Indians. I speak for myself out of my own background and experience and professional training. I myself am a social worker. I'm interested in community and social action, and this is a type of involvement in the community that I spend most of my time doing. Occasionally I do make speeches, but at this point I should say I'm a little tired of talking about the problem, and I'm interested in talking to people who are wanting to get involved and who can help. Now, we should talk, especially in terms of Indians, about the philosophy of helping. I myself have been here in Minneapolis since 1961. I've worked in several different agencies as a program director of Waite Neighborhood House, 3 years in the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and a year now at the University of Minnesota. And I have many people calling me different times during the day on all aspects of Indian affairs. Once, one young man called me up and said, hello, he said, I have some clothes for the Indians, and what shall I do with them? So I said, well, I'm sorry, I'm not in the clothes business, and I tried to refer him to another place that might be able to handle this. This is what I call the old clothes approach to helping. Clean out your closets, and then you've done your good deed for the day. I think that with Indians, this has been particularly true. We want to help, and we end up doing for rather than doing with. Now, I know that we've all heard these phrases over and over, but I'd like to challenge each of you to think about this. What do we mean when we talk about help? In my opinion, when we talk about help, we mean helping people help themselves. And all too often with Indian people, this has not occurred. I meet many well-meaning people sitting across the table from me in various committees who want to help, but then when you really zero in and try to find out what they want to do, they don't really want to help at all. They want to make their own guilt feelings a little less and proceed on that basis. Now, I would like to outline briefly for you some of the problems as suggested in the first presidential message on Indians made to Congress by President Johnson the first week of March. This will give you a basic frame of reference from which to discuss. I should say that one of the big disadvantages is that the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which is the governmental agency in charge of administering programs for Indians, has no research division. And so almost everything that you hear about Indians is based on approximations and guesses. And this is very unfortunate when you are out in the field trying to develop programs and solutions to some of the problems. Everyone wants to know, how many Indians are there in this country? Well, according to that information, there are approximately 600,000. This is approximately the same population that was here at the time that Columbus, quotes, discovered America. Then, how many live on reservations? Approximately 400,000 live on reservations, 200,000 live in urban areas or outside of the reservation areas. 50,000 Indian families live in unsanitary, dilapidated dwellings. The unemployment rate is nearly 40%, and this is more than 10 times the national average. 50% of the Indian school children, double the national average, drop out before completing high school. Indian literacy rates are among the lowest in the nation. Thousands of Indians who've migrated into the cities find themselves untrained for jobs and unprepared for urban life. The average age of death of an American Indian today is 44, and for all other Americans, it is 65. 10% of American Indians over age 14 have had no schooling. Nearly 60% have had less than an 8th grade education. And even those Indians who are attending school are plagued by language barriers, by isolation in remote areas, by lack of a tradition of academic achievement. Now, I'm not going to go into all the points that I have here on my cards, but I would like to mention a little more about health. The health level of the American Indian is the lowest of any major population group in the United States. The incidence of TB among Indians and Alaska Natives is 5 times the national average. I think you can get the picture in terms of health, education, and social conditions. On a national average, the Indians are at the bottom. And I should say that this is also true here in Minnesota. There are approximately 21 to 24,000 Indian people here in the state of Minnesota. No one knows exactly how many there are here in the Twin Cities, but the estimates are from 5 to 10,000. I could go on talking about the problems of urban living, but I will summarize them by saying that the Indian people are isolated in the reservation areas, are not oriented to city life, come here with improper education, inadequate orientation, and due to the residency barriers, have a very difficult time for the most part. Now, there are many Indians that make it, but at this point, we don't hear much about them. Our press continues to feature the negative sides and very often does not emphasize the positive contributions. And because Indian people are a small population group and are at this point relatively unorganized, we don't have an NAACP, we don't have an Urban League, we don't have many of the other organizations. You don't hear much from the Indian population. Now, I've outlined the social problems on the national level, and to summarize, we have some of the same problems on the state level and on the city level. And what is being done about it? We have a multitude of agencies who are now beginning to address themselves to some aspects of the problems. I have many requests for in-service training sessions from the teachers, the social workers, and others. We're beginning to organize committees of Indian people concerned with education and other matters. But this is a long haul, and much will have to be done by everyone concerned. Now, where is this in terms of you? First of all, attitudes. I see a sign up there in the dormitory which says, "White racism must go." And I'd like to echo this. The attitudes that minority people are confronted with are very difficult and are very disheartening. This is also particularly true of American Indians. Oftentimes, people look at me and others like me and say, "You're not an Indian." And by this they mean I'm not weak, dependent, poor, inarticulate, backward, and out of it. If you stand up and speak out, and are a little aggressive, if you're too quiet, you're too passive. If you're too aggressive, this isn't acceptable either. And so this is a very difficult situation for many of the minority people to be in. So the first point here is for you yourselves to become better informed and more knowledgeable, and also to look at your own attitudes the attitudes of your family, the attitudes in your neighborhood. Now, I think I've used up more than my 10 minutes. I've tried to outline some of the problems, and I hope that this will stimulate you to further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Deere. The two gentlemen here to my left are, my far left, do you want to rev on that? How's that? Reverend Mr. Harold Andrews, who holds a great many positions, more than I could suggest. He's a consultant to the Minneapolis school system. He is an assistant pastor at Sabatani Church. He is involved in the Decoy organization and many others. The gentleman to my immediate left is a student who will be graduating this year from Central High School, Mr. Reginald Berr, who has been quite active in the Decoy organization, and perhaps he'd like to tell you something about that. This morning at our session, we began not with any particular address, and we didn't really have an Indian representative except 1/4. Mr. Andrews also claimed some Indian blood, which made him a spokesman to some degree also for the Indian communities this morning. But we are asking ourselves here about the particular problems that exist in our ghettos with respect to social services and community services. And I think it is clear, I don't think we have to be told an awful lot about the fact that there are deficiencies, about the fact that schools are often not as adequate in these communities as they are elsewhere, that playgrounds are less adequate, that swimming pools are probably few and far between, and if they are available, not in good condition. One of the things that also comes up is the thing that was emphasized by our speaker just before this discussion, namely the problem of social service, particularly aid to dependent children or aid to families with dependent children, where we tend to break up the community rather than to strengthen the family. We break up the family rather than strengthen it. Now, I think we have some kind of an idea here of some of the problems. I'm going to ask each of these gentlemen to say whatever he wants to say this afternoon, after which I think we'll open it up to a rather general discussion and perhaps ask ourselves some more questions about what we can do, and more particularly what we in the Augsburg community should be concerned with. You want to?
Well, considering the fact that Ms. Deere is in a hurry, I would prefer that we answer or ask some questions, if there are questions in regards to what she has already said in reference to the Indians and the Indian affairs, and after which then we could...
All right. That would probably be a little bit better. We'll give her a chance than to Swan.
They had a program with CBS on Forgotten America. The point he made right at the end was that there's a basic dilemma about that the Indians often who go off the reservation come back, but you have a basic dilemma in that they can't find work on the reservation and they're too poorly oriented to go off the reservation. I just wonder what your personal opinion is. Where do you think it's going to end up? Is it going to be better training to try to get them off, or are you going to try to bring in employment to the reservation?
Well, I'd say it's both. It's not an either-or proposition. I think that there should be adequate minimum standards of living in all areas of our country for all of our people. And for too long in the rural areas, and especially among Indian people, among the Negro people in the Delta country, they've been denied basic services. This, of course, is a function of the appropriations and the way the services are delivered by the various agencies. Now, in terms of Indians, I would say due to the isolation and the real domination by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, many Indian people don't really have adequate choices. They don't understand that if they don't go to school at 16, they'll be dropouts and then be condemned to a very poor existence. So what I would like to see would be adequate housing, adequate schools, in these areas. And then if a person wants to leave the reservation, they'll be adequately equipped. Now, at this point, the budget of the Bureau of Indian Affairs is $250 million. That's a lot of money. 17,000 employees for approximately 400,000 people living on or near reservations. Then, of course, they'll be coming to the cities, and there's a big dilemma here because Congress has authorized money for expenditures on the reservations, but has not really given authority to expend for services in the cities. And so when Indian people come into the cities, they're needing all kinds of services. Many of the agencies say, Indians, oh, well, they're taken care of by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And so here the person is caught in this dilemma. And this is where we need to change. We need policies changed, and we need additional money for some of the programs.
I'd like to raise a question at this point, Ms. Deere. A few years ago, I was sitting with the advisory committee from South Dakota to the Civil Rights Commission. And we ran into some really difficult problems out there. We were trying to come to grips with this, some of the things that, some of the problems of the Indians in South Dakota. We discovered one thing, and that was that there were some communities. Rapid City was the most obvious example of this. When an Indian family, or another poor family, but it was primarily the Indian families, when they would move to Rapid City, they would be served by the local authorities with what was called a certificate of non-residency, which said in effect that the social services that we provide for people here are not available for you because you are not a resident, and if you stay here for 20 years, you're not going to become a resident for purposes of receiving these social services. Do we have any such problems, say, in the state of Minnesota that you're aware of?
I think it would be better if you did talk to someone that was actually involved in the welfare department. I know that there are subtleties that exist. For example, there's a certain allowance in the budget for lights. If some families don't have lights, then they don't get an allowance for lights. And so actually, in many ways, there is some additional lack of money, and there's, I guess you could say actually some types of discrimination that exist in the way the budgets are administered. But these are very subtle things, and you have to be kind of a detective to try to track them down. And I am not an expert in public assistance, so I think to adequately cover this particular aspect, you really should have someone here for public assistance.
Well, I thought it was I don't know. Do you know of any?
It's available. There's no discrepancy at all as far as the Indian is concerned. You referring to, you said public assistance, the FDC.
Yeah.
Well, they are eligible to receive. If they're living in the city, they can receive it.
I was talking about up in some of the northern areas where they get less money.
Are there other questions for Ms. Deere? Yes.
The gentleman from Detroit, I believe some of the things that they're doing are educating the black person to his African culture. Correct me if I'm wrong. Does the Indian in America, on his culture, does he want a type of modern Indian image or something, or does he want, how do you feel about culture of the Indian in America? Do you think they should, like the thing that you have on your dress there, do you want to relish in that, or do you want to?
I think this is a very interesting question. It gets into this whole area of identification. And a person is designated an Indian by the Bureau of Indian Affairs for services if they have 1/4 degree Indian blood. Now, because a person has 1/4 degree Indian blood does not necessarily mean they're Indians. In the old days, traders got on and various other people got on, so that's part of this whole definition. That's a legal definition of Indian. A social definition that I find helpful is a person is an Indian who identifies himself as an Indian and who is identified by the community as an Indian. Now, some of the Indian communities in this country have still a great deal left of culture. by this, I mean their total way of life. They speak the language. For example, the Indians in the Southwest, they speak the language. They still carry on some of the ancient religious practices. Their family and kinship systems are still in operation, and so on. Various other groups, this is not true. And there's still a lot of interchange going on. I think lots of people think that we have pure Indian culture here, and then we have the non-Indian culture, and this is not the way it is. And here in this area, we've had traders and others making contact for 300 years. So we have people driving cars and television and all these things. And this is one of the big problems of trying to help, I think, people define who they are. And I should say that in this society, if you're a minority person, nobody lets you forget it at all. And I think that one of the things that all of us have to do is remember that we're human beings together, and that we do have some similarities and that we do have some differences. Now, with Indians, much of the culture and the history has consciously been destroyed. There is no teaching of Indian history in the schools or Indian culture, and as I mentioned earlier, at this point we don't have a strong pan-Indian movement in the country providing the type of leadership that SLIC and SNCC and the NAACP and the host of organizations among the black community is doing. So it's kind of a long answer to your question, but these are some of the points involved.
Another thing, I think that sort of acts as a catalytic agent to this stereotype image of the Indian, even more so than the black man, is that there are many people who definitely are ignorant to the contributions of the Indian to our modern day society. I don't mean historically in this country. I mean since they have become Americanized or westernized to the white man's ways. And I think this goes more into your question as to whether or not the Indian, in teaching minority history, are we going to consider also the contributions of the Indian? Or are there any such contributions? Which I know already, but this is more of the nature of interest, I would assume, as to the education of the Indian and of everybody else in society. So if you could even relate now to some such contributions, you see, I think would more or less.
Well, there are many Indian individuals that are making contributions right now. For example, we have Mrs. LaDonna Harris, who is a Comanche Indian. She is the wife of Senator Fred Harris from Oklahoma. She has been appointed chairman of the Women's Advisory Committee to the OEO. She was the first congressional wife ever to testify before Congress on behalf of legislation. She testified recently on behalf of the OEO legislation. We have Mr. Robert L. Bennett, who's the commissioner of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. We have, I'm sure you've heard of Congressman Ben Rifle from South Dakota, who not only works for Indians, but for all the people of the state. And at this particular point, I don't have time to go into all the other ones, but yes, there are contributions. And one of the sad points here is that in Minnesota, we're in Indian country. We look on the map, we can see many towns that have been named after Indian names. And if you study history from an objective point of view, you can really dig into this and see. Oh, and I want to relate to your question about being a new Indian. There's a book out called The New Indian, and I think it's a rather poor book myself, but anyway, this is, I think, the challenge to all of us. Many people, as I mentioned earlier, have a stereotyped idea of what it means to be an Indian. You know, you have to act a certain way, and we are in a democratic society, and I think that the choice should be open to each of us as individuals of what type of person we want to be. And I feel that there are Indians in this country who speak the language and who carry on some of their practices, but at the same time can have an adequate standard of living. This is particularly true among some of the Indians in the Southwest that live in Albuquerque and some of these other places. They take part in their tribal affairs, but still they come back. Each person has to make up their mind as to what they'd like to do. Now again, I'm expressing my opinion and my frame of reference. You should really hear other Indians. You should hear people from the Bureau of Indian Affairs, you should hear tribal leaders, and then you'd get a full scope of the picture.
All right, a question over here.
Yes, do you believe that the Bureau of Indian Affairs itself needs a major revamping?
Yes. I worked in the Bureau for 3 years, so I know.
I think it's interesting that I was living in South Dakota, and I was in Ben Rifles District, and it seemed to me that we in South Dakota somehow felt that we had proved that we were doing right by the Indian by electing Ben to Congress, and that somehow it was sort of therapeutic, cathartic.
You've done your duty.
We've done our duty. Our problem was solved. It's very easy to get this feeling. Here's a man who's of some accomplishment, who's good Episcopalian and half German.
He meets the right standards.
He meets all the good standards, and Ben
Then they let
Ben
you in.
Rifle was our Indian.
That's right.
Yeah. Another question here I saw. So I said, yes.
I was wondering what organizations that are here in the city that are interested in talking
There are a number of organizations. There's the Department of Indian Work of the Minnesota Council of Churches. There are several small Indian organizations that are social and cultural in nature. We have a couple sewing groups, and we have the Upper Midwest Center, we have the Four Winds, we have a teenage group, and so on. But at this particular point, we don't have one particular agency, such as an Indian Center, that is fully staffed and fully financed, that could really meet some of the basic needs of the Indian people, such as the Urban League does for some of the other minorities. Oh, I also wanted to say, as long as I have the floor, as far as I'm concerned, I feel that with the small minority population that we have in this area, which is like about, 3 or 4%, it's just inexcusable that there should be the extent of problems that we have here in terms of housing, education, and discrimination. And I feel that if we are not able to do something about this here and now with this small group of here in this population, in this urban area, that it's going to be, if we can't do it here, who's going to do it? And this is why we need, your help. I'm sure my colleagues would have something additional to say.
Are you rested up sufficiently now so we can give Ms. Deere a break and let you take over? Yep. All right.
I am not a Negro. I wish not to be addressed as a Negro. That may shock you. I am a black man, a proud black man. I am an Afro-American. I belong to an organization called Decoy, Determined Ebony Council of Youth. Determined, I think we all know what determined means. Ebony, we are black. No white belong to our group. When I say council, right, I belong to the council, but we have like a Congress. At least 500 to 700 students in the south side of Minneapolis, some north, that belong to Decoy. Youth, I say we are youth, we are young adults. That's because we prove that we can think for ourselves. We feel we need no person 60 years old or 50 years old to tell us what we need at our age. We can think for ourselves. I'm in the 12th grade. We feel that one of the major concerns of the community is black power. I realize some of you tremble to the word black since the community gives the name black as being bad and white as being good. Black power is political, economic, social, and psychological advancement for black people in America. I'll talk about the political and economic part because it all has to relate to the community, but this especially. Politically, black people in their community should control the politicians in their community, in the politics. Economically, we should control all the businesses in the community. Indians were put on a reservation. We were put in a so-called ghetto, which is the same thing, a so-called reservation, put away from the rest. What made the ghetto was an economic, something like a cycle. When I say control the economics of the community, I mean control the businesses. It's like when you take your money, which you earn a little bit from the white man, and you go spend it in his store. The white man's not going to live in that tore-up neighborhood, so what does he do? He goes off in his suburban, I'll just say suburban, his suburban neighborhood and spends it there. Therefore, the suburban neighborhood gets richer and richer, And that so-called ghetto gets poorer and poorer. See, when we talk about so-called ghetto, we got to get a understanding between all of us in here what a ghetto is. The dictionary says it's a group of ethnic people in a certain area. Therefore, we all over the United States, we have Polish ghettos, Italian ghettos, Swedish ghettos. But you give us this name, ghetto. Anytime you say ghetto in school, everybody knows what they're talking about. They're talking about black people. I am not a minority. I am a majority. When you start calling yourself a minority, you can go so far. Minority, anytime you think minority, you think small. I'm not small. I said before, anything that happens in this community at Augsburg College affects the city. Anything that affects the city affects the state. Anything that affects the state affects the country. Anything that affects the country affects the world. Therefore, there are more black people in the world than there are white. Communication is too great to be just talking about a certain district, a certain area. Because anything we do in Minneapolis, if we set good examples in Minneapolis, which we are starting to do, then that's going to do good for the whole country. Like I say, I am not a minority, but I am the majority. One of the things that white people can do in the communities, I live on the south side of Minneapolis. The south side of Minneapolis is no ghetto, so-called ghetto. Black people are spread out all over the south side of Minneapolis. White people, after the death of Martin Luther King and after the so-called riots, which we call economic revolutions, political and economic revolutions, the first thing white people do, they say, what can we do for you? That's not the problem. It's what can you do for yourself? If white people weren't racist in the first place, there wouldn't be no problem. So what you do, you don't come over and join our organizations, but you get your own selves together. That's where the problem is. You get in your own social gatherings and start figuring out why does the black man have a tail, which is something you put on us. You get, like I say, black people have the biggest problem with getting themselves together. White people, get yourself together. Then when white people get themselves together, then you can truly integrate. When one's stronger than the other, like the American system is based on, the one on the top is always going to be exploiting the one on the bottom. But it shouldn't be because a person is black or a person is yellow. It shouldn't be because he has a different culture than yours. One of the biggest hang-ups that America has, if a person's culture isn't like to theirs, they say he's culturally deprived. They say the black man in the ghetto is culturally deprived. He is not. He has a culture of his own. He has a heritage of his own. He came from Africa. One of the things you can do to help communicate better with black people all over the city, all over the country, is learn the history of black people. Learn the history of so-called minority groups. Then you can coincide with them. You can get along with them. You can know something about them. You can't respect somebody who you don't know nothing about. To get to the problem, you can't start at the top and cut it off. It's like a tree. To kill a tree, you don't get at the top and cut him off. You get at the root of the problem. So what I'm saying is, before you can get through with the problem, you have to know what started the problem. You got to know back during slavery. You got to know all the contributions that black people have made in America. Not all, but there's quite a few. It's not hard to look up. I like to say that Patrick Henry said liberty or death. When a black man in the so-called ghetto says liberty or death, he's a militant. That's another word we get hung up on. Militant means able, by dictionary definition, able and willing to fight. President Johnson is militant since he is sending us to Vietnam. So what we do, black people and white people, we worry about getting our own selves together. White people get black people together, white people together, and black people get black people together like they've been doing. That's about it.
Okay. Mr. Andrews?
Well, I'm a lot like Mrs. Deer. I don't know how many of you were here this morning, but I don't care to be repetitious. I didn't come out here to be eloquent either. I speak, I don't know how many times a day. I got to speak again tonight. And there aren't enough hours in a day for me. Every one of those positions, and he doesn't know all of them himself. I've got to fill them. If not, get out of the way and let somebody else do it. And the reason I'm doing so much, because I have found that there are so many good-meaning people who says, let me help. And when I go home, I can't sleep at night, wondering if they will. And when I see them the next day, I say, did you take care of that? No, I'm doing it right now. And I can't wait like that. Consequently, I'm like one of these guys in a small town where he pulls you over for speed and takes you to court. He's the judge, and then he takes the fine and he gives you a haircut. He's the barber. I'm doing so many things. But until enough people stop talking and start doing things, I'd rather rust out. I'd rather wear out, that is, than to rust out. Because this is a very serious matter to me, and one to which I have dedicated myself. And I'm so dedicated because I have anxieties. I have fears. I've been where you can never go. I've heard what you can never hear. And I know what can happen if we don't do it now. And I didn't need the Kerner report to tell me that. Matter of fact, the Kerner report is only a repetition of what was proposed in 1919 in Chicago, Illinois. Same report. Matter of fact, it looked like they just quoted some of it. And this is a thing that I couldn't say that perhaps you here, the youth, could have been aware of, but I'm sure the adults have. This is why I have lost a lot of faith in the preceding generation. What I think I would prefer to do now is to give you a little background on just one organization and what we're doing. And maybe then from this you can get some ideas of what you can do. Decoy. I'm the United South Side. My capacity at the time of this, of my getting involved in this, previous I should say, to get involved, was as a social worker at Central High School, at which time I was working on a one-to-one basis with the students. And then something happened. The kids, after getting a little educated about blackness from the way on the north side, decided, well, why don't we have one on the south side? This is where it's at. So they got together and said, we're going a south side way. And man, when they said that, their parents and the whole community were aroused. And they said, well, wait a minute, let's have some sort of confrontation before you do this now. Let's have a meeting. Let's meet and discuss this. And that meeting was packed. And as I said this morning, we are just a people who respond to violence. And this is why they packed the house. And the minister himself got up and said, if I could get half as many people here on Sunday, I could call this a church. But instead it's a community house because that's when everybody comes when there's something, controversial. And this seemed to be quite controversial. And I can remember Seal Davis himself standing there and saying, you are here because you're uncomfortable. Because the word way was mentioned. And the way moves people. And boy, I couldn't deny that. Because they were there for that purpose. And so after a lot of dialogue, a lot of eloquence, a lot of, showing off who knows what about what, nothing was being done. And I stood. And I faced the youth who were organized. And they were attacking the adults, and the adults were fighting back, but nothing happened. And I said, what do you want? And they specified some of the things they wanted. Then I turned around and looked at the adults. I said, would you deny your own child anything that they just asked for? They said, no. I said, well, let's do something. And as it was, and seems quite the picture, I even see the picture now. It was like this table. I don't even like to talk behind a table. It's a psychological disadvantage to talk behind a table. I faced one of the kids. I said, stand up, son. He stood up. Which direction is right? He pointed to my left. I said, no, this is right. And I looked at the people. I said, now who's right? He said, you both are. I said, yeah, but we're pointing in different directions. I said, let's get around on the same side of the table. And what I was really trying to get, the philosophy behind it is that in our communities, institutions, and what have you, it seems that we all face opposite sides of the table. We're both right. And the community suffers because it's always in the center. As far as the schools and the community is concerned, the school is looking out their window at the family, the residents, and saying, that's the community. And they're looking out their window at the school and saying, that's the community. Now it's an issue of black and white. We're looking out our window at you saying, that's the problem. And you're looking out yours at us. When you see riots and things and say, that's the problem. And we both think we're right. When we really have to, in reality, come around to the same side of the table and look at it together through the same window, we will be very surprised to discover that we're both in the same community. We're both in the situation together. And it is not a black problem. It is not a white problem. It is an American problem. And when we come to the point that we realize this, then perhaps there can be some pursuance. You see, as he was talking about the effects going from state to a national and international level, as other countries look at us, they look objectively. They look at America, particularly those who are using propaganda as a means of exploiting other countries and influencing others to become like communism, socialism. It's easy now. We have lost the Cold War. And these are such things that have caused us to lose it. When we say we are a non-aggressive country, nation, we love the world, and we're fool enough to think that with money we can compromise. We'll go over, and then this came straight from the horse's mouth. I talked to a congressman, and he said, sure, he said, many countries are not really allies of ours. We give them money, and we'll give them this money. And what do we want in return? Well, when we want to vote on an issue in the UN, we expect them to vote. Now, if I did that right now, if I was running for office, and I gave you money and said, vote for me, what would you call me? Particularly if I were black. I'd be a black one of those, wouldn't I? All right. Let's stop being hypocrites. Let's look at ourselves as a family. We are, whether we like it or not. I know I had a brother. We fought every day. Sometimes nothing to fight about. We look at each other and say, well, we ain't had our fight today. There we go. My brother. As much as a lot of black people hate to say so, we're still brothers. But now they say, well, you're distant cousins. They don't want to say brothers. They say, we're brothers. But we must, it's virtues, love, respect, integrity, whatever you call them. You don't demand them. You earn them. No man can make any other man or any individual love him, but he can earn it. But that doesn't go one way. It goes two ways. And it comes out of sincerity. As they say in the church, that's what comes from the heart, reaches the heart. And I hope it does. This is the thing I'm talking about. From this point, I got with the kids. They organized. And they said, we're going to have a Southside Way. Then they decided, well, there's so much controversy, and we want them to know that we have the strength among ourselves. We don't need to lean on anybody. We're not going to be affiliated with anybody. We're going to change our name. We're going to change our name to Decoy. Well, I never questioned them about that word. And if it represents Determined Ebony Council of Youth. But you know what a decoy is. Those of you who have been duck hunting. It's a false. Well, you know, it's the little duck that you buy at the store. And you put him out there to draw the others. And then when he draws them on, then boom. This is not the connotation, though. But still, it is in a way. And I don't even know if they were aware of it. Right now, we've got the South Side Way. We had it before even the way moved there because the concept is in these kids. The concept is in me. I believe it. But concept is like anything. This ashtray was designed for one purpose. Putting butts in and putting out ashes and putting out cigarettes. I can take this and make a weapon and probably very, very definitely kill somebody with it. And anything else, a pen, anything. It's how you use it, even in a concept. This is what has created, I believe, the reluctance, not only in white people, but in blacks who fear even the word black power. You hear black, you hear power, you eradicate power, and you say supremacy. I heard a man speaking one time, a black man. He said, we don't want black power. I said, man, how do you know you won't want something you ain't never had before? There's never been any black power in this country. It may be better than white power. But no one has ever said, no one has ever inferred even, that by having black power that we would just totally eradicate white power. What they're really saying is equality. And so much so that the National Conference on Black Power about 2 weeks ago in Washington, D.C., sat down and we decided that we're going to even change the word to equality. And you'll be fighting just like decoy, you know, the same concept, but just changing words. It's terrible how words affect people. The organization was founded, and then we had to get adults to work. Out of 60 teachers at that particular high school, I got 47 to volunteer right on the spot. Every social agency, every institution on the South Side, we got them all together in one organization, us, the United South Side. And it's from there that we began to move. And this is how Decoy was able to effectively get the things on the school board, like the 20th for Malcolm X Day for interrelease, like a school holiday for Dr. Martin Luther King, like just going to school, to the history books, throwing them out. We don't need black history. We don't need minority history. We need to tell it like it is. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to build that book up properly. And if we have to go back to the publisher, if we don't buy it, he'll print what he's got to sell. We're not going to buy it. Then there's the sensitivity training. We need people staffed. You want to know what can be done? Staffed and trained properly to the sensitivity of the problems of racial issues. Not only the issues, but to the history, to be informed. Now we only have a few resource places which we can get such a thing. We sent 3 teachers from this area to Fisk University this summer to be trained where they have the most extensive resources in black history. Right here in the city, Decoy is getting another thing now. A library equivalent to theirs, right here in our own city. A nice conference room for U.S. to meet in. These are the things of nature, to build constructively. And this can be done by black and white, because United South Side by no means is black. We've got people like Nat Ogle, the superintendent of secondary schools, Committee DeSantis, Jerry Heckstrom, alderman. I can name a lot of people who are white, who sit down together. They don't tell us what we should do. We run our show. This is our program. We're running it. But they're definitely there to give whatever aid they can. And this is what I feel we can do. You've heard over and over again to go home and to your white neighborhoods and educate them. Well, this is vitally important. But I by no means am saying that that is the end of it. But we must work together. We must realize that that wheel that turned and built this nation to be the nation it is had both black and white shoulders pushing it. And if these 2 shoulders refuse to push, then the wheel can no longer turn. The injustice of it is that the black shoulder was doing the pushing and the white shoulder was steering. But now we must push together because the wheel is too great for any one, a black or white shoulder, to push along.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, the format this afternoon varied rather considerably from that which went on this morning. We've only got a few minutes left. Let's see if there are any responses or questions that we should have here to either of these gentlemen. Yes.
Well, I've heard a lot of conflicting opinions about just what the role of the ghetto should be in society now and in the future, and I was wondering what both of your opinions might be on that.
Why should there be a ghetto?
That's what I say too, but I've heard people who say there should be a ghetto. Negro people.
One of the problems is when black people go to buy a house in a white neighborhood, they've usually had to pay 2 times as much as the house is worth to live out there. I know a man who came here from Arkansas, He went to buy a house in Minneapolis. Now, you know they got that open housing bill. They always got bills and human rights and civil rights to make people human and citizens, make black people human and citizens when black people were on the docks unloading the boats, when these immigrants, white immigrants, were coming here. But yet still they got make them special laws to make them citizens. One of the things he did, he went to buy a house. When he came here, he didn't have no car. He went over there on Hiawatha Avenue. First he called up before he went there. They said, yes, we have a house for sale. He went over there. He walked over there. What happens? As soon as he gets there, I believe his undertaker said, oh, wait a minute, I have to call. He called the owner, told the owner. He must have told the owner he was black. As soon as he came back, he told the man the house was sold. So naturally, black people are going to be put in the ghetto. Another instance, a woman down the block was going to buy a house on 28th and Park Avenue. That's right by my house. They had a for sale sign in the window. She went there, and they took it down and said it was sold. A week later, that for sale sign was up. That's what's going to make a ghetto. white people seem to want black people to be in a certain area. That's just like when black people say 10 of them, not even 10, get behind closed doors. White person got to know what's behind them doors.
Well, another thing too, and then we went over this morning.
Different groups.
Oh, well, in defining the word ghetto, it's merely defined as any ethnic group in one geographical location. So by such a definition, St. Louis Park is a ghetto. You see. Now, if this is the type of a ghetto you're talking about, there's no problem in a ghetto. You see, I don't even want to live in St. Louis Park. I'm perfectly satisfied when I'm living, although maybe when I'm married and I got a family, I'd want a home, but I dig my apartment. You understand? But on the other hand, I want my ghetto to be as well off as St. Louis Park's ghetto. You see what I'm talking about now, inequality? This is that word integration. See how you define it in two different ways now. Not individually, but I have listened. And most white guys I talk to, when he says, say, man, what do you think about integration? I know what his next question is, but I usually politely wait to hear it. And you know what it ends up being? The black man and the white woman. And this is his fear of integration. This is the main thing that makes the white man afraid to integrate. He doesn't want the black man and the white woman to get together. Now, that isn't how the black man interprets. Not me. That ain't the way I interpret integration. I have more values. I have more things that I'm considering in integration. What I'm saying when I say integrate, number one, in regards to where I live, whether I am satisfied on the south side of Minneapolis or anywhere else, that I have the right to that pursuit of happiness, to go there and live there. This is integration. Or if I so desire, and I am financially well off, I can go out there and join that country club. That's integration. And when I go, when I go on my day, I might take all black brothers and sisters with me, see? But still, we'll have that privilege. This is what I mean, integration. And then there's another thing, we must go into token integration. As he was saying, Dakota, they had their Indian. And the first thing struck my mind was token integration. In my investigation of this high school over here, when I walked in, the principal had 3 students. Then I want you to talk to these. Mr. Andrews, they were black. Now they can tell you like just what's going on. Well, I looked up, I went and checked the guy's IQ out. Heck, he got one of these big IQs. His brother's set a record over there that nobody can match. You might have heard about his brother, Mr. Gossett, who just, they brought him over to the university, and he's tremendous, you know. When he graduated from high school, he was equivalent to, what was it, Reggie? On his IBM, not IBM, but computers. The guy's a mathematical genius. Now, if you're black and you come in that school, if you're not like that, no token. And then I've been here just a year. And since I've been here, I have so many tremendous privileges. I had a problem one time, financial. I walked up to a gentleman, a white man, say, man, I got a problem. I need $400 right for this. Sure, Harold. Wrote me a check. Beautiful, for Harold Andrews. But until a black boy, whether his name be Harold Andrews, Joe Blow, or anybody, can get the same type of treatment, we have no equality. You talk about integration. And the ghetto is the same way. Until anybody can walk out there and get a house, you see, in that ghetto or any other ghetto, then it's so. And then it's nothing wrong with ethnic groups being clannish. They always have been, except the black man. You see, when you get the Polish American Society, I've seen them, you know, all Italian American, Spanish American, they go down and have a good time, they do the poker. When we get together, here comes the press. What's going on here? What are you doing? A bunch of black people together. They're going to riot. We can right now, if everybody black would get together and we say, it's a nice day, let's walk. If we walk down the street, I guarantee you either a state trooper or the local police will be there cruising around and trying to see what's happening. And you can turn around and do the same thing and not a thing would be said. Equality? No. Integration? No. You see what I'm saying? And that's a two things.
Our thanks to Mr. Andrews and to Mr. Berry. We're grateful. These two gentlemen were with us twice today. I know that's over and above the call of duty. We're grateful to all of the resource persons today, and of course to Ms. Deere, who had to leave for that other appointment. I have been asked to make another announcement. It has to do with Dudley Riggs' Brave New Workshop. It will be a 1/2-hour specially written drama for our one day in May. And it's going to be at 4:30 in Melby Hall. And there is no charge, which is certainly an extraordinarily good bit of news. So at 4:30, you are all invited to be there. Then the evening session with Milt Williams will be held in the College Center lobby at 6:30. Again, our thanks to you and our thanks to our panel members.